creatives often get influenced into that expectation, or that kind of, they're forced into a place where it's like, oh, I have X amount of followers now, I must be doing this. I think that's why I originally released presets and LUTs, is because, I had 20 odd thousand followers on Instagram, and I kind of, was being told by people around me who didn't really have any idea about the industry and didn't really know influencer marketing and didn't really know the value of 20,000 followers or whatever it was. And they were all sort of in my ear going, why don't you do this? You should be selling this. You should be making this much money. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And it kind of forces you into this expectation that not only am I expected to sell products that I don't necessarily believe in or do things that I don't necessarily believe in, but you're also not allowed to have a part-time job, or you're not allowed to freelance on the side. Welcome back to the podcast. How's everyone doing this week? I'll tell you what, it has been so beautiful here in Melbourne the last few days. It's been windy as hell, but that's kind of part and parcel to living in Melbourne. If any of you live in Melbourne, you would know that you can't possibly have a nice day without it being windy as hell. So it's kind of just an expectation that we've come to appreciate, that yes, you might get a little bit of sun, but you're also going to feel like you could get blown over at any moment. So that's part and parcel to the course. Unfortunately, here in Melbourne, living here, we don't get the tropical weather of this beautiful sunshine and calm breezes. No, it's beautiful sunshine and 30 knot plus winds, which is, it is what it is. It is what it is. You can't complain too much, can you? Because it's finally warm again. And I'll tell you what, it's really, really difficult, surprisingly, to sit down on a Sunday after you've been sitting out in the sun all day and went for a run in the sun this morning, and then turn on artificial lights, close the curtain, shut the door, and sit in your room and record a podcast. So if the podcast suddenly goes outdoors for some random reason, just know that it's because I wanted to take advantage of the sunshine for this summer. I'm not even kidding about that as well. I'm genuinely considering setting up, or I was genuinely considering setting up a little corner in the backyard on one of the tables or chairs out there and recording the podcast outdoors, because even though the audio would be absolutely horrific, at least I would be sitting out in the sun. We've started the podcast with weather talk. If that's not an indication that this is going to be an interesting episode, I don't know what is. I'm sorry about that. We really didn't need to start the podcast with weather talk, but here we are. Starting the podcast with weather talk. How's everyone's week been this week? How's everyone been? I had a good week this week. Like I said, things have sort of slowly, the light at the end of the tunnel is far more present than it's felt like it is for the last few weeks. It's frustrating because I feel like Dan Andrews is kind of like my mum when I'd want to play Xbox as a kid, and she'd be like, you have to do your homework or your chores before you can play Xbox. It's like, and like threatening to like break my Xbox or get rid of it or sell it if I wasn't to do the chores, if I was being a bad kid or whatever. I feel like Dan Andrews is doing that with our summer at the moment. Like his whole talk about the whole St Kilda beach situation. If any of you are from Melbourne as well, I probably shouldn't dox myself, but hey, I feel like there's not that many, not too many of you listening to this. I live in that area, so if you see me, say hi. But I was running along St Kilda Boulevard on Saturday around the time that the reporters, it was like 3 p.m. or 2 p.m. or whatever it was. And I'm going to be honest, yes, there were a lot of people, but I genuinely feel like the reporters, and this is classic journalism 2020, they're all horrific at their jobs. I feel like the people that they caught on camera, like kissing the guy and being loud and obnoxious, I wish there was a behind the scenes photo, because I can guarantee you that it was those guys filling the frame and being obnoxious because they'd been there drinking all day, and then everyone else socially distancing. Yes, there were people on the beach who were coming in and out of the water without masks on, but generally people were following the rules. And I mean, what do you expect, really? Like, if you're going to allow restaurants to, because can we talk about that for a second? Have we just waived, and I don't disagree with this at all, but have we just waived the whole outdoor drinking thing here in Melbourne? Is that just not a rule anymore? Like, I feel like that's just the Victorian government have been like, we've taken pretty much everything from them. We might as well give them outdoor drinking. Because a lot of the restaurants are serving like cocktails, just takeaway cocktails, takeaway beers, takeaway whatever, out in the foreshore. So, I mean, honestly, I don't know what they were expecting. They allow you to meet up in groups of 5 from 2 separate homes, hang out in public spaces, and the restaurants and all the bars and stuff along the foreshore are serving takeaway drinks. Yes, you're likely going to end up with a situation where, I know I don't condone what those guys did. I genuinely do, because I was there on Saturday. I genuinely do, and I was there Sunday as well, and oh my God, there are so many police there. But I genuinely do believe it was just a case of journos there all day waiting for something to happen, and they finally found people at like 6 or 7 p.m. that had been there drinking for a couple hours, and they just brought them into frame and riled them up a little bit and then let them rip, and that's what they got, because that's how journos do their jobs these days. But I'm not going to bash on journalists anymore. This podcast is starting out a little bit differently than I had expected, but I don't know, I've been in a good mood for the last few days. I've sort of just, I don't know. The sun's out. I'm so much happier in the summertime. I've spoken about this. I don't think I have spoken about this, but I've been genuinely considering moving up to Queensland, not because of the lockdowns or anything like this. This is something that I've been considering for a while, but just because I know that I'm so much happier when I'm around, like I have a very weather dependent personality, and that sounds very soft of me, but I don't know, there's just something that I know intrinsically that I am so much happy, like noticeably happier when I am by the ocean or by somewhere warm. I don't even have to be taking full advantage of it. Like I said, I can be sitting in my room recording a podcast, but the very fact that it's 25 plus degrees and sunny outside makes me happier to be doing this here. Does that make sense? It's kind of like I don't know. We're talking weather talk again, so we can stop talking about the weather, because that's not fun for anyone. Not interesting for anyone. I had an amazing week of listening to books this week. I need to get back on the train with my reading, but I have started listening to her. I'm about halfway through, actually, or maybe a little bit more. Let's check. How far through am I? I think I'm almost exactly halfway through Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And can I just say thank you, David, for making me feel like the biggest wuss on planet Earth for ever even considering missing a training session or complaining about my work or doing anything that's even remotely soft or scared in any way, because that man just has an unbelievable story. If any of you are sort of, I would say it's an acquired taste. It's a little bit of a full-on. Definitely listen to it. This is the only time that I would probably recommend the audiobook over the actual book, because it's kind of like a half audiobook, half podcast. So at the end he doesn't actually read his own audiobook. He got someone else to read it, or a friend of his to read it. And the idea is that he wants to put you in his shoes rather than him reading it and it just being a story about him. And it works exceptionally well. But the thing that they do, which is really cool, is at the end of every chapter or at the end of every section of the book, they just chat like a podcast. And it's a lot of exclusive content. Like I originally thought it was just going to be like, oh, okay, well, they're just using this as a way to get more audiobook sales and it'll just be them having a conversation. But there's been a few moments where David's kind of like had a moment where the chapter's been read and he sat there and got, oh, I actually remember this story. And it goes on for like an extra half an hour for that particular chapter where he talks about a story that would supplement it really well. So I highly recommend listening to this particular book. It's a great pairing with my running. I was having a run the other day and I'm waiting on, God damn it, like Melbourne. Can someone please explain to me why, for whatever reason, Melbourne or Australian companies couldn't have used COVID as the perfect example of a moment where they could get their online shopping better or drop their delivery rates. I don't think this is the company's problem. I think this is genuinely an Australian Post problem. You guys are hopeless. I ordered, so I've torn through completely my running shorts. So I needed to get some new my running tights. I have thick thighs from rowing and my strength training days. So chafing is a real issue for me. Sorry if this is a little too much information, but so I ordered some new running shorts and they've been delivered to Australia Post on the 24th. Today is the 4th. And I'm still waiting on them for no reason. There's an Australia Post just near my house. The shop that I was ordering it from is literally less than 5 kilometers away. I can't go there obviously because they're not doing click and collect and they're not open. And I've been waiting like 3 weeks for them. So I've had to run all of this week in an old pair of running shorts and tape my thighs to try and stop the chafing. And I got about 10 kilometers into my run on yesterday. And the chafing was so bad, but I was listening to David Goggins, and coincidentally, the chapter that I was listening to was the Buds chapter from his Navy SEAL training, and he literally, I remember considering I was about like 15 kilometers through my run. And I was like, maybe I should just call it a day here and I'll get a coffee and I'll just walk home because this chafing's really bad. And literally as that thought came to mind, David Goggins goes, we were all chafed to hell and bleeding from our feet and our thighs and whatever. And I was just like, okay, right. Right. I better not stop. I better keep going. So it's an amazing pairing if you want to, if you're just into this world of doing, I don't know. I've always considered myself to be someone who enjoys. I think that's why I enjoyed swimming when I was younger because it was a good physical challenge. I think that's why I enjoyed strength training and rowing and all these sports. I've never really loved sport. I've said this before. I don't enjoy I never watch sport. I never watch footy. I'm just not interested that much in sport. But I do love the challenge of myself doing it, and I think that's why I've been so drawn to this book. Didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I have, but I have really enjoyed it. But beyond that, honestly, my reading has been a little horrific. I've sort of fallen off the horse on my good routine. I had a really amazing routine for a lot of this year where I was in bed by 9 p.m. In bed by 8, reading for like an hour, and then lights out by 9:15. And that sounds excessive, I know, but I was getting up early and I need a good amount of sleep to function. I've tried the whole not sleeping much and it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me at all. But I've just fallen out of that routine, which is okay. It's fine to fall out of routine. But what really scared me 2 weeks ago or towards the beginning of this week is how quickly the rest of your life kind of falls away when you're not doing those basic things like reading consistently and going to bed early or getting enough sleep generally. You can go to bed whenever you want, but getting enough sleep generally, like it's so crazy and scared me how quickly those elements of your life fall away as soon as one of those chess pieces falls or as soon as those, domino pieces fall. So I was like, oh, well, it can't hurt me too much to start doing some more late nights and just sleeping in and not really caring as much. But I just found myself less mentally stimulated since I wasn't reading as much and coming up with less ideas and being less motivated and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, it's crazy to think about how quickly things can sort of crumble if you're not being accountable to something or not keeping yourself accountable to your routines that you set for yourself. So I think this week I'm going to really, really try and get back on it, get back on the whole routine of getting my reading in, getting to bed early and making sure I'm on top of all of that sort of stuff because, as much as it does sound like I'm an 80-year-old man living in a 23-year-old's body, I just feel so much better when I do those things. I promise I'm not super boring, but I'm a little bit boring. And I just noticed that I just feel so much better when things are going well in that regard, and it allows me to almost have more fun in the aspects of my life where I don't. And then it's also the argument that I've heard so many times on Joe Rogan talks about it a lot, and I've always kind of felt this, but relaxation only feels good because you've put in the work. It's like if I sit down on a Thursday night and have a beer, or a Friday night, I sort of try to take it a little easier on Fridays, just because I know that I record this podcast on Sundays, and I tried to stop doing it because I know that I need to have my Sundays, but I kind of just got so used to that routine, and I actually really enjoy this routine. It kind of feels like journaling at the end of the week, but I got so used to that routine that I was like, oh, well, hell, I'm not gonna be able to just burn the candle at both ends. I'm gonna have to do something. And Friday was the day where I was like, okay, well, I'll take a little bit of an easier day. So what I normally do is I work pretty consistently from Sunday to Thursday, and then Thursday night's kind of like my Friday night. Like I just sort of relax a little. I don't go to bed as early, and I have a drink or two, and maybe watch a movie or something like that. But that's only nice if I've been consistent from Sunday to Thursday. But if I've been inconsistent and not really done much, or not done much is an over exaggeration, but had a less than optimal week, then Thursday night's not going to be super nice. And what's the point of that? There's no fun. So as much as it is a little bit boring to be in your routine and be strict and be accountable to something, I think that there's some great, it sort of separates the work from the fun. When you're sort of living in the middle, it's like the fun times aren't that fun, and when you're living, towards the middle, the bad times or the hard work isn't that hard. So it's like you're just in this intermediary period where it's like, I don't really feel challenged, but I don't also feel great. Whereas when I've had a really good week, when I've had a consistent week of training, getting up early, going to bed early, reading consistently, working hard. When I've had a week where I've recorded a video, recorded a podcast, posted consistently on Instagram, worked with clients and done all that sort of stuff, maybe done some back-end work and all that sort of jazz. When I've had one of those weeks, that Thursday afternoon 5 p.m. beer tastes so fucking good. So fucking good. That beer tastes incredible. But when I haven't, then I sort of feel like a bit of a fraud. And I sit there, I'm like, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this yet. And then I end up in this half-assed sort of weekend where I don't really take time off because I don't feel like I've deserved the time off. And it's just this like workaholic mindset where you just sort of like half-assing everything and not really getting anything done. I find it much better for my lifestyle to go hard or go home. It's like go all in and then go all in on your rest as well, or don't. If you want to half-ass everything, you're going to have to half-ass consistently, and it's not going to be that fun. So yeah. I had a little bit of a, I wanted to talk about this because it was weighing heavy on my mind this week. I've been working consistently, and I guess you guys are probably interested because it is relevant to what I'm going to speak about. This episode's going to be a little bit of a hodgepodge because I had so many different ideas that kind of weren't fully fleshed out or weren't full episodes. You know what I mean? Like coming up with a full podcast episode is kind of like, it's a little bit overwhelming sometimes because I got to know that I have, 45 minutes to an hour of content to discuss. And sometimes I sit down and I come up with these ideas and they sort of sit in that zone of like, this is not a full half an hour or 45 minutes of content. Whereas today I just had one of those days where all week this week I've come up with a few ideas and then I've just been like, it's not a full episode. So this is kind of going to be a hodgepodge. But, you guys know me. I often end up getting on a roll or a rant and then 40, 50 minutes later, there we are, and we've just spoken about something consistently for 40 minutes. So who knows if that'll happen today, but I'm not banking on it. So I wanted to discuss this because it has been weighing heavy on me, and I had this discussion with someone I really admire this week, and they were talking about how it's important to go all in. And not all in the sense that I just spoke about, but go all in the sense of how does your day or how does your time get divided up? Like what percentage of your time are you allotting to each specific thing? And the thing that he told me that kind of hit me a little bit is this week I've been focusing on my wedding business. So far in my life, this will be good information for you guys. Instagram and YouTube make me a little bit of money. I do occasionally do sponsored content. I did have digital products available. I took them down because I wanted to completely change those over. I'm working on some new digital products at the moment. I occasionally, like I said, do sponsored content. YouTube ad revenue maybe makes me $100 a month. Not a massive amount, but all up, it's a little bit of money. It's nice. It's a nice supplementary piece of income, but it's small. My main piece of income, or my main income, is my freelance business. If I wasn't to have that, I would probably have a part-time job, to put that into perspective. I just decided pretty early on that I would rather just work for myself all out, and I figured that the only way for me to do that early on is to have a freelance business or do freelance work. And this is something that I don't feel like, I'm going to talk about this, but this is something I don't feel like a lot of creators talk about. And it really annoys me that it's kind of like a piece, it's like taboo to talk about this sort of stuff. But I had this conversation where I was like explaining that I was working on that on the side, and I'm in the process of kind of separating my name from my business, because right now everything is under Tom Noski. My ABN is actually, the business is registered as Tom Noski, which is fantastic because I can umbrella everything that I do under one umbrella, but that's also the downside of it. So what I've been working on this week is kind of separating my wedding business, and you guys are the first to know. It's going to be Shuri Creative, or is that the right pronunciation? I'm sorry if I butchered that, but Shuri Creative, which is the French word for darling, or Shuri Wedding, sorry. And that's the French word for darling, and it's going to be my wedding business, where we're just going to start out with, obviously the work that I've done, a little bit of wedding photography and a lot of wedding videography. But eventually down the line, I want to turn it into more of like a one-stop shop, like a high value premium service for weddings, where you go and maybe we'll have a food truck available for you. And it's just sort of like a collaborative agency that a lot of vendors can work through. So say, for example, if you own a food truck or a coffee truck, we can have you work at the wedding. If you're a photographer, we can have you work at the wedding. If you're a florist or a caterer or a celebrant, we can have you work through us. And it's more of an agency in the sense that it's still a premium service. I think that's the issue that a lot of people go into, especially in the wedding business, is it's either individuals producing really high quality content or people that are trying to take advantage of the fact that it's lucrative and they're conveyor belt content that isn't really good, but it's inexpensive, so no one really cares. I don't want that. I want to turn it into something where the quality remains high, but we do that by going with the agency model where I don't employ these people. I also don't take a massive cut of their money. All I'm asking is to use their sort of likeness and their work as the marketing for that, in the hope that it turns into, a bigger brand, that one day we can do that sort of thing. And I was having this conversation with a friend, and he sort of sat me down and he was like, what percentage of your time are you willing to divvy up to this thing? And I was like, I don't know, right now, 75% of my time is, or let's say 60% of my time is on this stuff. So my podcast and Instagram and all that sort of stuff. And let's say 20%, what did I say? 60%? 20% is on my social life and Ironman training and that sort of stuff. And then 20% is on my freelance business. And he kind of challenged me and said to me, he's like, at what point does something in your mind cross the line between being a asset and being a distraction? And it hit me because I was like, in my mind, I think you need to be expending, or you need to be spending at least 30 to 40% of your time total on a particular project for that to have any possible chance of being successful. And it made me sort of doubt myself unintentionally. I don't blame him for having this conversation with me, but it made me doubt myself in a sense, because I don't know if I'm willing to put that much time into something like that. And I think that's why something like YouTube or even just my whole decision-making process around which platforms I focus on is because if you then divvy up the time between, each social media platform, it's even an even smaller percentage of time across multiple things. And it sort of makes you question whether you are doing something, whether it's worth your time, whether it's worth that 20% investment, or whether that 20% investment would be better used on doing more in this regard? That's sort of a question that I spent a lot of time deliberating over, and I think it's a good question to ask yourself. It's like, how are you dividing up your time in the week? How are things working for you in the sense of, where are you? So I love the example of, if you're someone who has a normal job, if you're someone who has, say, let's say you're an accountant. If you're a little bit older, if you're my age and you're still finishing uni, maybe you're a barista or a personal trainer or whatever it is. Maybe you're doing each of those things and you've got the ambition to, say, do music or photography or filmmaking or whatever it is. And let's say you have a really active social life. Hell, you might even be married, or you have a relationship that you spend a lot of time with. No judgment whatsoever. I think I'm just someone, and especially in this year, it's hard to judge, but I enjoy socializing, but it's not as much of and this sounds bad, but it's not as much of a priority for me right now. I kind of made a decision when I got into this job that I want to commit my 20s. I don't want to regret my 20s. I don't want to get to 28, 29, 30 and this is a very healthy decision that I've spent a lot of time deliberating over. So I don't want this to come across like I'm sort of like sitting here being like, I don't want to, I need to work. It's not that at all. It is just a decision that I made where I was like, well, realistically, for me to do something to the level that I want to do it at, I need to make that decision where I'm going to have the ability to say no, or have the ability to choose, or have the ability to just prioritize what's important to me. And no judgment. If you're someone that prioritizes your social life, that's more than okay. And that's why I think this conversation is good to have, because if you are someone like that, and say you divide 50% of your time is on your job, and that's mandatory. You have to do that because that's when you clock in and clock off, and it's 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and that's no exceptions. You have to do that. And then let's say you're a very social person, and you are someone who spends 40% of your time socializing. Say the weekends are complete write-offs. You don't do anything on Saturday, Sunday, and Friday night. And then during the week, you're working. And then in the afternoon, say your girlfriend or your partner or whatever, and you've got a lot of that time. And then the remaining 10% is on your music or your photography or your videography. It is kind of worth, and this sounds, this is something that I think every single person needs to kind of decide for themselves, but it is kind of worth judging whether that 10% investment is worth the time that you're putting in. And it's okay if this is a hobby, if this is something that gives you a sense of well-being, so be it. That's not what I'm talking about. Here I'm talking about people that actually have the ambition of one day turning that into a career. What I'm trying to tell you is that's unrealistic. I don't think committing anything under 20 to 30% of your time to something is worth it. And the question why I kind of decided, or the reason why this hit so heavy with me, and I think the question that you can ask yourself is what is your ideal, or what is your idea of a 10 out of 10 life? What is your vision of a 10 out of 10 life? And for me, that 10 out of 10 life came in the form of making money on my own accord. Doing something like this, doing something like the podcast, or doing something like YouTube, or doing something like Instagram, where I'm on my own time. I'm on my own accord. I choose what I want to do, and I make money doing so. That's my idea of a 10 out of 10 life, because that's complete creative freedom. I'm a creative to my core, and one of the things that one of the things that I simply can't do a lot of the time, and one of the things that really limits me in my freelance career, is I can't deal when creative freedom is taken away from me. And I think that's the allure of something like the podcast, or something like, I think it's even the allure of me doing the podcast solo, because I want to be in complete control of this. I am going to have guests on at some point, and I will do guest podcasts. But right now, one of the allures for me is the idea that I am in complete control of everything I do, everything I produce, and everything I say on here. So my idea of a 10 out of 10 life is committing wholeheartedly to this. Now, right now, I'm committing 60% of my time to that. But then I've got to ask myself, what would it, let's say, for example, things work out the way that I'm sort of safely anticipating right now. The reason why I do my freelance stuff is because of safety. This is quickly becoming money talk, and I'm really glad about this because it is something that I wanted to talk about or have wanted to talk about. But let's say, for example, that my safe option right now, is for me to have a business or a freelance or an agency working in the background that requires my attention or requires my input, but I'm definitely a business owner, not a filmmaker or not a freelancer in that regard. And that's why I'm trying to separate my name. The goal of separating my name from my agency and turning it into Noski Creative and Shuri Weddings is because I want to scale both of those businesses. I want to turn them into the point where I am more of a business owner in that regard. And the reason for that is I want those to work in the background to supplement this. I would much rather continue this sort of relationship we have where I don't need to monetize you. I don't need your money. I don't need to sell you things. If I do sell you things, or if I do sponsored content, or if I do start monetizing this podcast, it's because I love the product that I'm selling, or I love the product that I'm promoting, or I love the company who's sponsoring me. And that's an ability that I really do enjoy. I do enjoy the complete lack of pressure that comes with me getting on here and having a conversation with you or posting on Instagram or posting on YouTube, because there's no expectations from brands. Yes, that comes with the idea that I'm putting an exorbitant amount of time into something that's making me no money, and that is something that hits me a lot, often. But it is a comforting and relaxing feeling that I don't need to monetize you. And I think that my audience appreciates. I think you guys appreciate that. If you've been following me on Instagram for a while, I'm sure that you appreciate that, me promoting my print shop, for example, which is the only form of monetization that I have currently on my Instagram, with the exception of the brand deals that I have with, for example, the one going on with Trover Trip at the moment. If you are interested in coming to New Zealand with me, that is available now. I'll have that, actually, I'll link that in the description of the YouTube video. That's the last plug I'll do. But you guys, I'm sure, really appreciate the fact that I'm not driving products down your throat. And when I do promote a product, not only are those moments few and far between, but they're also products that I genuinely believe in and can genuinely get behind. That's something I really, really enjoy. I really enjoy that relationship we have where there's no expectations. There's no, I'm not forcing something down your throats. And I think that that's something that would disappear, or not disappear, because I don't think that's part of my character. I think the reason why I do that is because part of my character is that I don't enjoy selling something unless I genuinely believe it. But I think that I would definitely, I've had this conversation many times where, creatives are true to their creative spirit until someone needs to pay the bills. And then they're more than willing to pick up that real estate job. No offense to anyone who films real estate, but they're more than willing to pick up those jobs that aren't as enjoyable creatively. Everyone holds on to that creative spirit or their what makes them them until they need to pay bills. And that's the unfortunate reality of life. It's like, I think that if I was to commit full time to this, I would probably clutch at a few more sponsorship opportunities, because there's plenty that come my way. I would probably try and try and figure out ways that I could make products rather than letting those moments come to me. A lot of the digital products that I'm working on right now are products that I have started using or made for myself, and then gone, hell, this would be really, really valuable for other people to have. For example, right now, one that I haven't announced yet, I've made pitch deck templates. So one of the biggest parts of freelancing is pitch decks. And I've put together all my pitch decks that I already use, taken out the amounts and money and all that sort of, and the brands, and put in content that I can actually use and turn them into templates that I'm going to have available for you guys. Those are going to be up really soon. That's an example of a product that I genuinely believe if you guys make the investment and buy that product, you will get a benefit out of it. I think that the difference would be if I was to go completely full-time, I would probably be looking for more of those opportunities rather than waiting for those moments to happen. Does that make sense? Obviously, someone who's a very business-minded person is probably gagging at the fact that I haven't really done anything to monetize my audience, and I want to speak about that in a second, but let's bring it back to the point that I was saying. So for me, a 10 out of 10 life would be that I live off my own accord entirely and make content online, and that content is how I pay my bills. An 8 out of 10 life for me is to have a business like Cherie Weddings or Noski Creative. I need to get used to those two new names. Cherie Weddings, Noski Creative. Cherie Weddings, Noski Creative. Is if I had both of those businesses running in the background to supplement my ambitions on here. Yes, I would still eventually down the line be making money on here, but that money that I make on here would be my money. That's kind of my own spending money that I can reinvest back into this, or I can use for travel. And then my business income would be used to essentially supplement or feed my lifestyle, to pay my bills and keep me afloat and make sure that I have something as a nest egg to sort of keep me going in the background, because that's what it is at the moment. You know, I shoot weddings. I love shooting weddings. I love shooting sport. I love doing all that sort of stuff, but it is how I make my money. And that's how I pay my bills. And that's how I do what I can do. That's how I travel. That's how I do everything. And then let's say, for example, a 5 out of 10 life for me would be, you know, having to quit both of these things and going back and getting, say, a creative agency job, or a full-time filmmaker at a company job or whatever. Something like that, or doing some on social media or whatever. So those are kind of the breakdowns of what my life could be. You need to make that decision. You need to make the decision of, okay, if you're someone right now who's working a job and you're committing 10% of your time to music, but your idea of a 10 out of 10 life would be doing music full time, and your idea of a 6 out of 10 life would be doing accounting or your current job full time, well, then it's a clear example of, hey, I'm going to have to maybe spend less time doing, the social things and spend more time on my music, or spend less time at work and more time on music, or go part-time at work and go full-time on music. There's all kinds of ways that you can do this. I want to lead on from this conversation because with the money talk, I had this idea just then when I was thinking of this, but I think there's this expectation that comes with social media where creators develop. Here's the thing. I don't think, no one really starts with the desire to make a lot of money in this field. There are people that obviously do now. I think that there's plenty of people that see from the outside looking in this career, and they see it as an extremely lucrative opportunity, which from the outside looking in it is. I don't believe, I genuinely believe if you wanted to make money, there's plenty of ways to make money a lot quicker than being a creative and being a full-time creative. I think that, there's definitely still kind of the rite of passage that comes with being a creative person, where you got to pretty much expect that the first few years are going to be a lot of time being broke. But I think the thing that I noticed a lot, and the thing that I want to speak about, is that I think creatives and true creatives get into this industry with the expectation that, I'm going to do this because I enjoy it. I'm going to do this because I am passionate about this. And over time, as they start to build an audience, and I've experienced this, over time as you start to build your audience, the pressure or the expectations that you're making a lot of money, or you need to make a lot of money, kind of influence the way. And I was speaking about this with Hayden, because Hayden's someone that who hasn't really monetized his audience besides his merchandise and presets now. But for a long time, he hadn't monetized his audience. And I think that the thing that I really admired about him is he almost had 1 million subscribers on YouTube before he really monetized his audience. And one of the things I really admired about him is he didn't succumb to the pressure of doing it because other people expected him to do it. He was doing his job. He was making enough money for him to get by, and he loved what he did, and that's all that really mattered to him. Yes, he knew that the opportunity to make a lot of money was there, and he knew that there were people almost expecting that when they met him, or people almost expecting that was already the case. But I think that creatives often get influenced into that expectation, or that kind of they're forced into a place where it's like, oh, I have X amount of followers now, I must be doing this. You know what I mean? It's like, I think that's why I originally released presets and LUTs, is because, I had 20 odd thousand followers on Instagram, and I kind of, was being told by people around me who didn't really have any idea about the industry and didn't really know influencer marketing and didn't really know the value of 20,000 followers or whatever it was. And they were all sort of in my ear going, why don't you do this? You should be selling this. You should be making this much money. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And it kind of forces you into this expectation that not only am I expected to sell products that I don't necessarily believe in or do things that I don't necessarily believe in, but you're also not allowed to have a part-time job, or you're not allowed to freelance on the side, or it's almost taboo for, say, for example, I've been thinking a lot about the fact that I wish I had done my barista course, because I think it would have been an awesome opportunity for me this year in March when all this shit hit the fan for me to go and get a job as a barista. Not that I need it incredibly. It would have been great for me because I haven't really done any freelance work this year, and I've been my freelance work has been pretty much supplemented by JobKeeper. It would have been an amazing opportunity for me to go and get a barista job. And it's like, yes, I genuinely believe, and it sucks to admit, but I genuinely believe that a lot of the reason why I probably didn't is because of that taboo of, why would you need a part-time job if you have 70,000 followers on Instagram? And I think that that's this pressure that's just completely unnecessary and completely ridiculous. I kind of see this as, we're the luckiest generation. And I've said this before. We're the luckiest generation to be creative people. The luckiest generation to be creative people, because it's what a lot of us would be doing regardless of when we were born or when we, it's what a lot of us would be doing regardless of when we were born. But the thing is that it's the potential that we have now with social media, the potential that you have now with doing this sort of stuff and being a creative person. It is more accessible now than it's ever been to be a creative type. It is way more accessible for you to make a full-time income, and a good full-time income, being a creative person. That's not something that has ever happened before, but I think the issue that comes with that is that there's sort of this expectation of, you're thrust into a level of success. Your performance is so outward facing, your level of success is so outward facing that number that you have next to your name on social media is something that anyone can see, that it kind of develops this expectation that you should be achieving something financially. Does that make sense? It's kind of like, and I think that forces a lot of creatives into this. It attracts a lot of creatives, or it attracts a lot of people that aren't necessarily the creative types into this world. And then they are shocked by the fact that no, actually it is still exactly the same, in the sense that you have to not only build an audience, but build an engaged audience that really care about you for it to be monetarily, successful. But I think it also means that a lot of creative types that kind of just got into this because they love doing it, and they would be a photographer even if they were the last person on earth. It's like the I Am Legend test that I talked about last week. It's like, a lot of these people that are thrust into this are the kind of people that would do this regardless of whether they were on social media or not. But I think because their success is so outward facing, they end up in a situation where they're kind of expected to be making money. And that expectation weighs heavy on a lot of them, because a lot of them would be so much happier or so much less stressed if they just went and got a part-time job. If they just went and worked as a barista on the side, just in the mornings, just work part-time, 25 hours a week, working as a barista from 6 a.m. till 11 a.m., 4 days a week. It's like, that would give you the money to then be able to afford to travel more and not stress about making digital products, and not stress about the fact that you launched something and no one bought it because you didn't even really back the product that you wanted to. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned on social media is the fact that you can have 20,000 people who follow you, but if you've got no genuine fans that really fuck with what you do, then you're not going to make any money. One of the biggest pleasures that I've experienced recently is launching this New Zealand trip and seeing the response and getting the messages and having people sign on, having people join the trip. We're almost halfway full on that trip already after 1 week. because people, we're building an engaged community. And I think that is genuinely a byproduct of the fact that I just don't sell to my audience, because I recognize that I would be far better off, at least for now, doing this on the side. And I want to explain that to you guys, because I think it's important to recognize that, yes, I do this full time as a creative person. Yes, I'm a full-time filmmaker, but my freelance business is essentially the same thing as if I had a part-time job. It's obviously a little bit better paying because I'm the business owner and I make all the money that I do, but not all the money. All the money that comes from my business comes to me. Does that make sense? That's what I was trying to say. Not all the money. I don't make all the monies, but it's essentially the same thing as me having a part-time job. It's exactly the same thing as me having a part-time job. I just chose a long time ago that I'm not the type of person who can be told what to do. I've known this for years. I've had one job my entire life. I've had one job. No, two. Sorry. Three. Oh my God, I'm off with the fairies. But I've had a number of jobs my entire life. And one of the common denominators, I was just about in a fist fight with my boss at my personal training job by the time I left. I borderline got fired. The only reason they couldn't fire me is because they didn't have, the rules here in Australia are pretty difficult on firing someone. But they essentially cut my hours until I was barely working there. There was no point in me staying there anymore. Like, I'm not a good employee because I find it really difficult being told what to do. That is the only reason that I am not an editor at an agency, or a filmmaker at some creative space, or just a social media person somewhere, or hell, not just a barista somewhere, is because I just decided a long time ago. So try to kind of see through the bullshit on social media. And I don't want to say that in a bad way, because I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of amazing stuff and a lot of people selling some incredible products. Visuals of Julius, for example, is an incredible businessman. I trust every single word that man says as far as his business stuff, because I've seen his products. I've seen the way he markets. I really do believe that if he had my audience, he would be able to make more money than I make with my freelance business, because he's an incredible businessman. I'm not. I'm trying to be. I'm learning to be. I'm getting better at it, but I'm not. So I have to go and I have to freelance, and I'm okay with that. But what I wanted to explain to you guys is, try to remember that just because the outward facing image that this person is portraying on social media is that they're doing this full time, does not mean they are. Try to remember that, because it'll make you far more comfortable if you are someone that's working towards this, you are someone that's doing this on the side, or you are someone that wants to eventually do this full time. It'll leave you feeling far more comfortable in knowing that, hey, it's okay that I have a part-time job. One of my friends, Jesse is a dentist and he's an amazing photographer, but he's still a dentist. I think we've had conversations down the line where he wants to, and hey, Jesse, if you're listening to this, but we've had conversations where he wants to go full time with his photography and his filmmaking, and YouTube and Instagram and all that sort of jazz, but he's a dentist. And he's happy to hold on to that job because the stress relief that he gets from having a comfortable income coming in is far better than the stress of sort of constantly worrying about where his next paycheck is going to come from Instagram. So I think that's kind of a good thing to remember. A good thing to remember. There we go. Like I said, I had a couple of topics that I wanted to talk about, and we got one, and we're like 50 minutes in. Happens every single week. Happens every damn week. I wanted to talk about this as well, but I brushed over it at the start. Like I said, I've been really bad with my reading, but one of the byproducts that I've noticed with my reading is my procrastination has been horrific this week. My procrastination has been really, really bad, and I'm not proud of it, and I want to talk about it because I think it's important. And one of the things that I'm really ashamed to admit is my screen time. My screen time is terrifying. I'd never looked at the app because I was too scared to. I'd never looked at the amount of screen time that I was looking. I never looked at the amount of time that I was looking at my phone because I was so worried about how much it would actually be. and I looked at it, and I think my average for last week was 6 or 7 hours a day, which is like frightening. Now, granted, I need to say that at least 2 hours of those are probably because of my training. A lot of the time when I'm on my indoor trainer for my bike, I have my phone set up on YouTube or Netflix and I'm watching. So ignore that, but still, that's still a horrific amount of screen time. So like, it's just a bad habit that I knew I needed to shake. So this week, and I want to challenge each of you, because the difference that it made to my productivity is nothing short of incredible. It frightened me, and it comes back to this percentage thing. It's like, how are you dividing up your time, and where can you find more time? Where can you find more time on a daily basis? My mind immediately, as soon as I saw that screen time, rather than thinking like, oh, okay, how am I using that screen time? Is it productive? All my mind said was, that time is time that I am wasting, and time that's being taken away from my YouTube channel, my podcast, my Instagram, my business. So this week, all I did was tried to get my screen time. I made a widget. How good is iOS 14, by the way? If you're an Android user, what did I see this week? It's like, if you're an Android user and you're complaining about an iPhone, what's his name? Mitch Soul Design. He had an amazing post about this. Someone commented that he could, if he didn't spend his Mac money, so much money on his Mac, he could buy a Windows computer that was twice as powerful or whatever. And his response was, Lamborghini owners don't buy their, a Lamborghini owner could buy a Honda Civic for the same price and then use the extra money to make it really fast on a track, but you're still driving around in a Honda Civic. And it was sort of like, yeah, I could get an Android and it could have all the features and be really powerful, but I'm still using an Android. So I apologize to use Android users, but also screw you. I've got my iMac, my MacBook Pro here. I've got my iPad as a monitor. I've got my iPhone here, so I apologize. Although I do use a Windows computer for my Photoshop editing, so I need to mention that just quietly, because Windows or Microsoft sent me a computer and I actually really enjoy it. So I'm not even going to bash Windows computers because I use them for my Photoshop editing. I use the Surface Book because it's got the pen and it's amazing for the stylus stuff. It's almost better than the iPad Pro, except, pretty much, because the iPad Pro, the Photoshop app on the iPad Pro is horrific. So I use the Windows computer for my Photoshop editing and it's amazing. So I can't even bash Android, really, and I can't even bash Windows. That whole last point was for nothing. Well, anyway. But anyway, what I was saying was this week I just decided to focus on getting my screen time down. I was like, and not just down a little bit, I mean tried to get it as low as I possibly could, and it still frightens me just how much I'm using my phone, even when I'm trying to not use my phone at all. It's like this week I was really proud of it because I had Monday through Thursday, I had every single day under 2 hours, except for Monday. Monday was like 2 hours and 15 minutes or something like that because I accidentally left my phone on, like the screen on for a little bit when I went and had a shower, and I was really pissed off. It was like 6 p.m. I had like an hour and 45 minutes of screen time, and I was like, yes, I've got 15 minutes to lay in bed and watch a YouTube video or whatever it was. And I went and had a shower and I came back and I saw my screen phone on and I was like, you idiot. But yeah, I was really proud of the fact that I got it down to sub 2 hours. And one of the things that I just noticed is purely off the back of not using my phone for an extra 6 hours a day, the amount that I got done this week and the amount of medial tasks that I got done this week. The amount of things that, like, all those things on your to-do list that are just like, oh yeah, I'll get to them eventually. Like all the digital product stuff that I wanted to work on. I built a website this week that I've been putting off for ages. I got a wedding reel done that I've been putting off for ages. I completely did all the content for the Cherie Weddings Instagram page for the next 4 weeks. Like, I got so much done this week, and like tax related things and all that sort of stuff. I got so much done purely off the back of the fact that I wasn't on my phone for an extra 6 hours a day. So please, I want to encourage each and every one of you right now. First of all, look at your screen time right now. Open up your iPhone if you're listening on an iPhone and check your screen time, because if you're like me and you were someone who was putting off checking your screen time because you knew how bad it was, I want you to stop that. And I want you to go and I want you to make a widget that goes on your home screen that has your screen time. Don't pair it with any more. Don't put it into a folder where you can hide it away under another group of widgets. I want you to put it on its own widget on your screen and keep it there. And I want you to try and get it as low as you can. And then let me know how much more productive you are just because of that thing. And a good little hack that you can do that I've started doing, obviously, if your phone is related to, no, screw that. You can use your laptop for work if you're someone who works with your phone or does phone calls or emails or whatever. Keep your phone turned off in the morning. So as soon as you wake up in the morning, turn your phone off and put it in your underwear drawer and leave it there till at least 1 or 2 p.m. Treat it like intermittent fasting, but without your phone. That's an amazing trick that has really, really helped me out and really helped me be productive in the first few hours of my morning. Because I've done intermittent fasting in the past, so I essentially just took that mindset of intermittent fasting and put it into not using my iPhone, and it made such a massive difference. So go and give that a shot, because I promise it'll help. And the last thing, I had a whole section on procrastination that I wanted to talk about, because I wanted to talk about some tips on how to avoid procrastination, but I don't want to talk about that, and we're almost an hour in, 55 minutes in. I don't want to talk about that. We can talk about that another time, but I just want to leave that point on screen time with the thing that I spoke about last week, the Goldilocks zone, or the Goldilocks rule, or the Goldilocks whatever from Atomic Habits. I think a lot of people, especially when they struggle with something like procrastination, or especially when they struggle with something like, procrastination, essentially, it's I think they focus on the big, overbearing things that they can do, the things that are kind of the things that are intimidating, the things that aren't kind of the easy things that you can tackle right now that as a byproduct will help you do more in everything else. Something like screen time, something like reducing my screen time down to less than 2 hours a day is actually not a difficult task. It's not a difficult task at all. In fact, it doesn't require me sitting down and doing anything extra. But as a byproduct of that one small change, suddenly everything else kind of falls into place. It's like what I spoke about last week with the consistency thing. Once you take care of consistency on Instagram, on your podcast, or on your YouTube channel, everything else kind of falls into place. You're going to get better if you show up if you show up every single time, you're going to get better. And it's the same thing here. It's like if I consistently get, let's say my target is less than 90 minutes a day. Eventually I want to get to the point where all I'm doing on my phone per day is literally answering phone calls if my phone calls come in, and going on to post on Instagram, because you can't post on Instagram on your desktop. That's it. That's all I want to do eventually. I want to get it to that point. But right now my goal is less than 90 minutes a day. If I just focus on that one small task of keeping my screen time below 90 minutes per day, except for Sundays, then everything else is going to fall into place, because suddenly I have an extra 6, 7, 8 hours a day that's not being consumed by that. I have to do something with it. And hell, even if I don't do anything that's particularly productive, even if I don't go and suddenly start a new business or learn a new language or do something crazy that is overbearing and intimidating, even if I don't do something that's crazy with that extra time, even if I just, cook all my meals, that's in turn going to make me feel better, and in turn going to make me more productive. Even if I replace an hour of that per day with some more reading, or if I listen to an extra book, or maybe I record an extra podcast, or maybe I get more time to edit photos, you can see how it can start to snowball, and little actions that might not seem like they have consequences everywhere else can really help you gain momentum everywhere else and gain momentum in the rest of your life. Because it does come down to that fact that this week, or the last 2 weeks, I've fallen out of my habit of reading. And because I fell out of my habit of reading, I fell out of my habit of going to bed early. And because I fell out of my habit of going to bed early, I fell out of my habit of getting up early. And because I fell out of my habit of getting up early, I fell out of my habit of doing my training in the morning. And then all of a sudden I was doing my training in the middle of the day. And then all of a sudden I was getting less time for work. Can you see what I mean? It's like I didn't stop reading because I knew that I was going to be training in the middle of the day. But when I stopped reading, I didn't expect everything else to fall out of place. But it did. Because those little habits that seem inconsequential to everything else that you do actually hold a massive amount of weight in the routine that you have on a daily basis, because momentum. I've said this before and I'll say it again, but momentum is so fucking powerful. So fucking powerful. It can single-handedly make or break your career. If you get on an updraft of good momentum, like I feel like I have with this podcast, I feel like I'm fucking invincible on this podcast. I feel like I'm gonna show. I feel like it's a what's it called? I can't remember the saying, but I feel like it's a certainty that I'm gonna show up here every week. So all of a sudden, because I know that I'm gonna show up, I can focus on making the content good, or I can just focus on making it sound better, or I can focus on my setup looking better. I can focus on posting it on YouTube. Hell, I could even go and focus on, hey, I kind of want to start a second podcast with a friend of mine where we talk about relationships. That's a real possibility because I know that I'm going to show up here every week and I know I enjoy it. So all of a sudden I have this opportunity where, why don't I start a second one? You know what I mean? It's like it's little inconsequential things that you do on a daily basis that all kind of snowball and help you do more things. Figure out what those things are. You know, for you, it's not necessarily going to be your screen time. Maybe you're someone who just doesn't really, you're just not addicted to your phone. Maybe you're someone who doesn't really use social media, so it's not that big a deal for you. But maybe you're addicted to Netflix, or maybe you're addicted to YouTube, or maybe you're addicted to, maybe you're someone who doesn't get enough sleep and you're up late gaming or something like that. Or maybe you wanted to develop an exercise routine, but you don't really want to. But you haven't really started. But what you can kind of use as fuel for the fire or fuel for the motivation to get it done is the fact that, yes, starting a new exercise routine might seem small and insignificant to your goals as a creative entrepreneur. But simply by having that exercise routine in place every single day, you would be shocked by the increase in productivity or just the compounding effects of that on the rest of your life. If you feel better, if you look better, if you move better, if you're healthier, if you're getting better sleep from working out, what kind of effect is that going to have on the rest of your life? So I think that you can kind of, if you are someone that has been suffering with procrastination, rather than giving yourself a to-do list or buying a new journal or figuring out a way to plan your days or figuring out a way to get motivated or listening to another podcast, I know you're currently listening to this one, try and find your Goldilocks thing. Try and find the thing that is not too hard, not too easy, the thing that is just right, just in that small pocket of space where it's the right thing for you to do that's going to help you with the rest of your life. That small thing, just that one small thing that's going to snowball and help you move forward. So, yeah. I mean, I like it made such a difference this week. It made such a massive difference this week, and I have to mention it because it's screen time, especially with The Social Dilemma. Is that the movie that's going on? I haven't seen it yet, but I feel like it's a hot topic right now, the whole screen time debacle. I wanted to finish this episode with a question because I mentioned this a few weeks ago and I forgot to do it on the last few episodes because I get worked up and then all of a sudden we're an hour and a half in and I haven't said anything. So I think we're an hour and, what are we? We're an hour and 5 minutes in. That's okay. That's enough time to do a question from someone. I got this question from Tom Flynn on Instagram, on the Real Life Podcast account. So if you're on Instagram, go and follow the Real Life Podcast account. And if you got any questions that you want me to answer towards the end of the show, send them in there and I'll get to them as best I can. But he essentially asked in a long-winded way, he said that he's 20 years old and he's getting into photography and videography and he's feeling old in comparison to lots of teenagers who get the opportunity to start early. And his question is kind of, how do you avoid the feeling of it's too late? Or how do you overcome the feeling of, how do you overcome the shame of, am I starting too late? And I think this is a good question because I know for a fact, I've had conversations with you. There's a few listeners to this podcast who are much older. They're getting into this and they're much older in life. And I really appreciate the fact that you can relate to this sort of stuff. So I think the idea that you're too late is dumb. It's flat out dumb, because I think that anything that I'm a huge believer in everything happens for a reason. Yes, there is certainly parts of me that would think, I genuinely know for a fact that if I had have started this, or if I had have started filmmaking when I was 15, I'd probably be a hell of a lot better than I am right now. But I also know that the value that I gained from working full-time as a personal trainer for 2 years when I turned 18 carries me well now, because I know how to handle clients, run a business. I know how to handle my finances. I know how to be smart with my money. I know how to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have otherwise learned if I just went straight into being a creative. I have experience working in the real world, so I know what it feels like to hire a videographer. I know what it feels like to be on the other end of that transaction. I think you need to remind yourself that, and I also started. I didn't start till I was 21. I didn't start my business until I was 21. I had been doing it part-time for a while. I think I first picked up the camera when I was 19, but I didn't start my business until I was 21. I didn't start my Instagram page until I was 19 or until I was 20. I don't think that there's any such thing as being too old to start or starting too late, because what you bring to the table requires you to have started late. So I think you should just try to focus primarily on, bring it back to the 10,000 hour rule. Yes, it would be nice that, you started at 11 years old and by the time you were 20, you'd already done your 10,000 hours and you were competent and capable. And yes, there's plenty of success stories where you hear about the 16 and 17-year-old kids that are full-time Instagrammers and incredible photographers because they've been doing this as early as they could pick up a camera. But as long as you just focus on what you can do, then that's all you can control. Because it's kind of like, it is just worrying about something that you have no control over. It is just trying to control something that is incontrollable. It's like let's bring it back to Stoicism. I think one of the things in Stoicism that, the key point of Stoicism that I find at least very comforting is the idea of what's within your circle of influence. What is the thing that you can control? And Stoics, in a lot of business related stuff and in a lot of life coaches will kind of tell you you're in control of you. You can only control your actions. You can only control what happens. You can't control what others do to you, but you can control what you do and all that sort of jazz. But Stoicism goes a step further and says that you don't even have control over your body. You don't have control over what happens to you. You could get sick. You could get hit by a bus. Anything could happen to you. But what you do have control over is your mind. And once you kind of recognize that, yes, people can see that as oh shit, I don't control anything. And that can be something that's quite intimidating for people. But for some people, and myself included, I find that incredibly comforting because that's a huge amount of control. Because suddenly, rather than going, okay, I'm 20 years old and I'm only starting now, and he's 15 and he's already got 5 years experience and he'll have 10 years of experience by the time he gets to my age, that's something that's completely outside of your control. But what you can control is how you respond to it. And that's what Stoicism gives you, is this ability to go, yes, those things are outside of my control. That's something that I have no ability to influence, but I can still control how I respond to it. And if I was in that situation, and I have been in that situation, I did only start this when I was 19 years old. I didn't pick up a camera until I was 19. My opinion of that was, okay, yeah, I don't have the technical experience. I don't know how to use a camera, but I've been an artist. So let's try and, join the dots together. Let's take the things that I've learned over here and bring them here. Let's take the lessons that I learned from personal training and turn it into my creative business. What experience do you have? Are you someone that, were you an athlete when you were younger? Take the discipline that you've learned from that and turn it into how you can take that discipline into your creative business. There's always ways that you can start to compound your experience. Yes, you might not necessarily have strict technical experience as a filmmaker or as a photographer, but you might have experience being disciplined, and that discipline is being built over the course of 8 years. It might have been built in 2 years in sport, 2 years in something else, 2 years in something else, and then 2 years in filmmaking, but that's still 8 years that you can bank on being powerful enough to carry you in this new career. So try to just remember that. And this is for Tom, but anyone who feels like they're starting late. First of all, I started late, and it's just the way it is. It's something that you can't control. I can't control it. But also try to just remember that everything that you've done so far has led you to where you are now. And as long as you're comfortable with where you are now, well, then you can't question what's already happened. And that sounds very airy-fairy, and it is a little bit. That's probably the one part of my life that I am a little bit airy-fairy, in the sense that I genuinely believe that everything happens for a reason. And that gives me a lot of confidence to not regret anything, because in my mind, everything I have done has led me to where I am now. And I'm happy with where I am now, so I can't possibly regret anything that's happened. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Because the bad things have led me here, the good things have led me here, and the ugly things have led... Sorry, I thought someone was coming into my room for a second there, but everything that I've done, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of those things combined have led me to where I am now. So I cannot possibly regret any of it, because if any of that was to change, then I wouldn't be here right now. Does that make sense? I hope that does. I'm going to leave it at that, because I think we've been ranting for a little bit here, or at least a while here. If you want to answer, or if you want me to answer any of your questions, shoot them over to the Instagram page, Real Life Podcast. What is it? Real Life _podcast, I think it is. I should really know this. Yeah, Real Life _podcast. Follow the page and send me questions over there if you want me to answer questions at the end of the podcast. I might start putting a question box on the story over there a day before the podcast if you guys have got any topics that you want me to cover, because I want to make this a regular thing where I answer some questions towards the end of the pod. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really do hope you enjoyed it, because I had a lot of fun making it. As I always say, and as I will continue to say until I am red in the face and you have well and truly completely lost all trust that I'm going to say anything other than this at the end of the podcast. Yes, that was a little bit excessive, but here we are. If you have enjoyed this, I would really appreciate it if you could share the podcast with a friend. Share it with someone you think may appreciate it. Share it with someone you think might just be a little bit bored in lockdown. We've only got 2 more weeks. Once people get out of lockdown, then they're going to need all the podcasts they can get for their commutes on the way to work. How good does that sound? Commuting to work. Ugh, my God. I won't be commuting to work regardless of whether I'm in lockdown, but a man can dream, eh? No, I do hope you enjoyed it. But as always, all of that is entirely up to you, because, I'm not your dad and you don't have to do anything I tell you to do. And I'll see you guys next week.